What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Always Compete Seahawks podcast. My name is Sam. Thank you for joining me today. A really earth-shaking day in Seahawks land, in kind of, just a general Seahawks world. As far as earth-shaking days go in recent history as a Seahawks fan, today is probably third behind Pete Carroll getting fired and Russ getting traded and Bobby getting cut. Both of those days were very crazy, very hectic. Today, while maybe not being as monumental as the other two, still feels like a big deal. Tyler Lockett, the 10-year kind of Seahawks legend, played the entire 10 years with the Seahawks, has been released. This was widely expected, but it still really does hit hard nonetheless. It is really the end of an era with Lockett being just such a presence, a steady presence over the past 10 years. He was the longest tenured Seahawk going into this year, and now he is no longer that. So a monumental shakeup as far as team leaders go, as far as faces of the team goes, as far as the building goes. He is really a huge loss for this team, but it was expected the amount of money he was going to be making. As we all know, it all comes down to money. You could be a great player, and if you're not making the amount of money that it fits you, you can get cut. If you're a great player making elite money, you could get cut. We've seen that happen before. I think last year Tyler Lockett was a good player making great to elite money, and it ultimately just quickly came that this was not going to work out. They tried to work out some sort of restructured contract. Ultimately, you got the sense that that was never going to happen. And Lockett gets cut as expected, still hits hard. I doubt he returns on a smaller deal unless he's really sitting out there in free agency and both teams see it making sense. But I would frankly expect much more of a contender to go out and get Lockett and have him play there for a year. Contender that needs receiver. I'm thinking perhaps the Chargers. I'm thinking Houston. I'm thinking teams like that that could need a good veteran presence on that team. Lockett makes a lot of sense. The Seahawks will save 17 million against the cap, so it's a sensible cut where 17 million is a lot of money. The Seahawks are going to be working now after yesterday having cut Draymond Jones and Ray Robertson Harris and Rayshawn Jenkins and George Fant. Now to today where you cut Tyler Lockett, all that together, I believe, totals to like roughly $45 million in saved money in the last few days. So I believe the Seahawks are now somewhere in the 40s, like high 30s, low 40s range. This is before what is widely expected to happen, which is a Geno extension, which could also clear another 20 million or so, which would give the Seahawks about 60 million to work with, which is obviously a pretty good war chest to go into free agency. But that really wasn't the big move. I was going to make a video regardless about just kind of like a thank you to Tyler, talk about his stats, talk about everything that he's done. And he does deserve that. 8,000 yards, probably an immediate Ring of Honor candidate. I was thinking, I don't know if he's going to be a retirement number type guy. I don't think he's going to be good enough to like make the Hall of Fame or anything. And that's typically the like at least one of the criterias that they look for. Like if you want your number retired, you have to be kind of a Hall of Fame quality player. I think Tyler Lockett will end up probably making the Hall of very good. Like he will not like Russ and Bobby will get their number retired. Richard Sherman will probably get his number retired. I imagine Cam Chancellor gets his number retired eventually. I imagine eventually all those guys eventually. I keep saying eventually. I imagine that at some point all those guys will get their number retired. I see Tyler Lockett more so as a Ring of Honor guy. But like I said, with the team for 10 years, just a legend, a consummate pro, a team leader for all that time. Just a very mature, quiet guy who always made the big play when you needed it. My favorite Tyler Lockett moment, I would probably have to say, even though the Rams catch on the sideline where he really tiptoes is great, I would have to say that game against the Giants, I believe it was 2 years ago, when he dropped a touchdown down the post or kind of like down the sideline, dropped a touchdown. And Geno said, "Hey man, I got you. I'm gonna go right back to you on the same route later in that game." He catches a touchdown, and it was like a very triumphant moment. Also, that Cardinals game where he had like 15 catches for 200 yards and three touchdowns. Just a legendary player. Gonna miss him a lot for sure. He's one of my favorites all time. I watched him, I mean, as a younger person, he's really like the first player that I watched get drafted and then really play for a long time and then leave the team. So, um, that's kind of an emotional aspect for me there. But that kind of was the big news going into the day where, it's just been a pretty crazy day for the Seahawks last couple of days with these cuts. And, that's what I was going to talk about going into this video. But then really a big time thing came out from, I believe, Adam Schefter was on it first. And it is DK Metcalf has requested a trade, and the Seahawks have given him the permission to do that. This was big. If you've been on Seahawks Twitter the last couple weeks, you've seen the reports from Corbin Smith, mostly Corbin Smith, saying, "Hey, the Seahawks have offers on DK Metcalf." I think a lot of people misconstrued that to say that the Seahawks are shopping DK Metcalf, which is not true. Some people, and then like he said, a Packer was on the table, offer from the Packers was on the table, and it was like a first, a receiver, it was like a first, a young receiver, and a later round pick or whatever, or an early pick is what he said. But most people took that to mean a first, could have been a second as well. Um, and then the Packers guy for the Athletic comes out and says, "Hey, this hasn't happened. They're not talking at all. There's been no negotiations." Which could be the team trying to keep it under wraps. It could be smoke, could be whatever. But then we mostly went in after that saying, well, yeah, the official big names have said that DK isn't going anywhere. It seems like they'll probably just end up working on an extension with him, and we'll see where that goes. And then things things get weird today. DK requests a trade. Ian Rappaport said it was after multiple weeks of discussions. I assume those discussions were likely a, a varying amount of things. They were probably talking about a contract extension. They were probably talking about, hey, like we have offers on you. They probably told them about that. They probably told them just about the entire situation. I imagine that they were very open. Um, and after a couple weeks of talking, DK came in and his agents came in and they said, "Hey, we want out." I think DK. I think one of the things that Rapport said was he wants to be on a contender, which obviously means that he does not see Seattle as a contender. He is entering the last year of his deal. He's set to make, I believe, like 18 million in just raw salary. But I think when he signed his contract, it was like 3 years, 24. I mean, 3 years, 24 a year on average, but maybe, I don't know. I think he's got like 1 year and 18 million roughly on that deal left. Um, I think DK is doing this and his agents are doing this because they see the year that this is and how good of an opportunity it is for DK. The guy who everybody was talking about was T. Higgins. T. Higgins gets franchise tagged. He's probably not going anywhere. I imagine that Cincinnati is going to be very stubborn with him. I imagine they're going to work that out, and I imagine that they will say, "Hey, T, listen, we want you here, and we're going to keep you around for a while." And then so then your eyes kind of turn to the draft, where like Ted McMillan, as far as number one wide receivers go in a draft, is pretty weak. If you think about other years where we've had like Jamar Chase and Marvin Harrison, guys that get a ton of hype as like generational wide receiver prospects. Ted McMillan's kind of a weak number one receiver. And then, especially if you're considering the fact that he's probably off the board in the top 10, then you're going to, okay, Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, pretty weak wide receiver group at the top here. So when you factor all that in, DK Metcalf's value probably skyrockets compared to other years. If this is a year like last year, where it's maybe a better wide receiver free agency class and it's a better wide receiver draft class, teams are probably less all in on DK. But given how weak this draft class is, I think there is a world where Seattle gets a first round pick out of this. I wouldn't bank on it, but I don't think any teams in the bottom 10 that are contenders that need receivers will really hesitate to throw a first round pick on the table for DK. I imagine the Chiefs would be happy to do that. I imagine the Bills would be happy to do that. I imagine the Chargers would be happy to do that. I imagine the Texans. I imagine the Packers, like we said. All teams that need wide receivers and need like big time wide receiver talent. The Broncos could be a team that I see going all in on DK. Teams in that kind of lower half where this draft is not seen as that deep. If they have a glaring need at receiver, I imagine they'll probably say, "Hey, yeah, we'll give up a first for DK, given how weak this year is." Supply and demand. You're going to pay more if there's not a lot on the table. If you're sitting there and there are great receivers and a great wide receiver free agency class, you're probably talking about DK for a third. But in a year where it's really flat, I imagine you could get something really good. Like you're talking about Chris Godwin as the number one wide receiver, who's good, but he's a slot wide receiver, not really a true natural number one. And he's coming off of a real major ankle injury. So I think the value here could be DK for a first, a late first. I'm not saying like Oakland is going to or Las Vegas is going to trade number six for DK because that's just not even remotely in the realm of possibility, especially given the fact that A, he's not really in the top echelon. It's not like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase is on the block. I think if T. Higgins was on the block, I think he'd get more interest than DK. But regardless, I think DK is a guy that I think this is a trade that will happen. Um, Seattle was clearly open to listening to offers beforehand. This is not a Myles Garrett requesting a trade where the Browns are staunchly opposed to moving Myles Garrett. I'm still unsure if he'll get moved. Um, but it's to a point now where the Seahawks were already listening to offers, at least according to reports, which is fair. John Schneider would not be doing his job if he wasn't listening to offers. But I think the fact that he's listening and now they're saying DK comes in and requests a trade, and they say, yeah, you know what, go ahead. And they said, you can go look for trades, and then we are going to also go look for trades. So DK, I imagine what his agents will do is they will go around and they'll say, hey, so you want to trade for us, right? What are you going to pay? Because that's kind of what happened with Matthew Stafford, where he went around, talked to the Giants, talked to the Raiders. The Raiders, I know, I think I heard specifically the Giants matched the money that he wanted and then they match the trade comp that the Rams wanted. So that's kind of how this thing works when teams say you go look for a trade because most of the times when players request trades, it's about contract. Sometimes like with Myles Garrett, it's about hey, this team sucks and I want to play somewhere else. But most of the time, it's for hey, my contract isn't good. Um, get me out of here. And yeah, and then the team says, okay, fine, you can go do that. You go talk to teams about money. We'll talk to teams about comp, and then we'll meet in the middle. If a team is willing to meet the money, they're willing to meet the comp. Realistically, hey, that should happen. But I think all in all, what we're talking about here is a guy who just I don't know if DK really wants to be here anymore. I think Pete was kind of his guy. I don't know if that's true, but ever since kind of Pete left last year, it was a little weird with him where he was never really he had a couple great games to start the year and then a couple great games here and there and then never really hit his stride and he had those issues on the sideline where he was like kind of sulking and moping and just a lot of kind of weird energy around DK last year. And I think, hey, if DK is willing to go talk to Buffalo and Buffalo says, yeah, Seattle, we'll give you 31 or we'll give you 30, we'll give you a later pick and we'll maybe give you a little, maybe a receiver because it seems like Seattle would like to get another player in return. John Schneider kind of likes to do those trades where, hey, if you trade a guy to another team, he wants a player and picks. We saw that for Russ, where like he does not, John Schneider does not like to give up players straight up for picks because he sees it as like a pure loss of value. We always know John Schneider is always looking to compete, always looking to build a team that's ready to compete. I imagine he would probably be willing to say, "Hey, don't give us that fifth. Give us this young receiver, or give us this mid receiver." For instance, the rumor with the Packers was that the Packers were willing to give up a first and Romeo Dobbs. I could see that being a trade that John Schneider would take. I could see that being a trade that Mike McDonald would take. And maybe then you could say, "Hey, in the first round we can grab a receiver, and then we can grab an O line with those two first round picks." And we'll see how it works. Ultimately, this is a big thing. I don't want to say that it's a massive thing where I don't think DK will get traded definitively. I don't think I don't think DK will not get traded definitively. I think that there are a lot of things that could go weird here. For instance, I think maybe if Seattle walks in the room and has the contract, exactly the contract offer that he wants, I don't know if he'll say no. So we'll see how it works. I just really don't want to see people writing this off as another guy demanding a trade that never goes nowhere. This seems pretty, at least somewhat legitimate. And it doesn't seem like it's pure leverage. It doesn't seem like the Seahawks are just like, oh yeah, yeah, go look for trades and come back to us. Like, yeah, and then we'll just let them go, and then we'll just bring them back. I think if Seattle gets a trade they like, I don't think they'll hesitate. I don't think they view DK Metcalf in that kind of way. So I would look out on this. Something to definitely follow, and something that could materialize pretty quickly. Trades can be finalized within the next 5 days leading up to day one of the new league year. So if Seattle sees the trade they like, they could do it now, and we would hear about it. So, and if who knows, maybe if the team says, "Hey, we'll pay you," if a team like the Packers are the name that's going to keep coming up. The Packers come out and said, "Hey, we'll pay you," and, and then they say, "Hey, Seattle, we'll give you a first and Romeo Dobbs." That could happen very quickly if the team is desperate enough. So we will see how that all works out. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It's been a pretty crazy day for Seahawks land and everywhere around. Let me know how you guys feel in the comments below. I will keep uploading some stuff as free agency and all this stuff really starts to get going, and hopefully we'll hear some more Seahawks news soon. In the meantime, stay tuned. I hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out.